Welcome back, пани та панове, and on this beautiful... Что ты творишь? Чел просто ходит в кадре. What a wonderful day outside. Birds are singing, flowers are blooming. And on this beautiful day I'm gonna show you an updated version of my app that I developed, TMPAD called. It's Themed Manager per App DOWNSCALE. And this Android utility allows you to run your games in lower resolutions and use other useful tools. So first things first, I'm gonna demo the app real quick. So here's my favorite level in my favorite game, which I play occasionally, but I have depression, so I don't do it very often. And as you can see at the start of the level, it's handling it quite alright at 120 FPS, but as soon as the action starts, it drops significantly. So you can see it dropped to 60. So you see it has dropped to about 60 FPS. And a few moments later, it's going up to a 40 around. And that's not the bottom of it. And even dropping as low as 30 in some cases, or maybe even 20. Well, I think that's enough for a demo. As you can see, it's running at native scale. The thing is, it's running at 1080p, which is native resolution of my screen, and it's a little too much for a processor that old. So now I'm gonna demo you with the game downscale. So here in the TMPAD, I'm gonna select performance preset and I'm gonna restart the game. As you can see, it's now is running at 0.33 scale, so it's basically 1/3 of the resolution, which translates to 360p. And now if I start the level, we're gonna see if that improved performance at any. And as you can see, there's basically no drop. The frame rate is really stable. It's at 120, and you know, where it was previously 40, 30, it's now 120, and you can play. There's no drops, there's no stutter. It's perfectly fine. So now I'm gonna show you how to use the app. First things first, when you launch the app, you're gonna be greeted with this screen, where you can select if you want to run app with root access or Shizuku. In case you don't have Shizuku installed or you don't know how to use it, I'm gonna show you. There's nothing complicated about it. You click the button, you download the app from the Play Store, you open the app, and now it's guiding you through how you should do it. You can read step-by-step guide here, where it shows clearly what options you need to click and what you need to do, but the gist of it is that you need to open developer options. I'm pretty sure you most likely know what they are. Then you open developer options, you go to pairing. Well, before that you need to give notification access. You open shortcut to developer options, you scroll down a bit, you need to find wireless debugging if you connected to Wi-Fi. If you don't connect to Wi-Fi, there is an alternative option by connecting to PC and running a command there. So you enable wireless debugging, you allow that, then you click pairing with code, you note the code 683761 in this case, and you can see that pairing is successful. Now you go back to Shizuku, you click back and you click start. In a couple of seconds it's gonna be connected. When you return to the app, you need to grant permission via Shizuku, and then you click proceed. The app gonna run quick self-test if all the commands it's using are responding correctly, and after that you can just click finish. Next, you're gonna see the list of your apps or games installed, and you find the game you want, for example Minecraft, and you select a preset if you want. So for example, these presets you can select native, quality, balanced, performance, ultra performance. They are basically different scales to which the game will be downscaled. So the lower you go, the lower the resolution will be, and it will be getting more stable FPS. You could click advanced configs to expand them, and you can see here more detailed view where you can see that it's downscaling to 0.2, and it's actually 216 by 482. You could select any resolution scale you want. You could type something in here. So for example, I could do 0.8 or 0.9 if I want to just a little of downscale. Additionally, you could oversample. So for example, you could set at 1.5 or 2.0, and that would run at higher resolution than your native screen. So for example, if the game is older and you want to play it at higher resolution to get better anti-aliasing or some other shit, I don't know. So in this case, that would be running at 1620 by 3600. And also you could set an FPS cap. Not all devices support it, but if your combination of device, game, ROMs do support it, you could set an FPS cap. It does not unlock FPS, it limits FPS. So if it does support it, you could, for example, set it to 30 FPS and have a battery saving effect. That's the basic gist for the core functionality of the app. You set resolution at lower scale and you get more FPS. It's as simple as it gets. If you want to go further, there are additional stuff and tools. For example, there are experimental configs where you can set different things that might work on some devices, but it is not universal. So for example, it might work on some Oppo device but won't work on Infinix, and one of them and the other one will. You could use DEX precompiling to optimize the app. So for example, if I click optimize with selected profile, it is going to unpack the code that is compressed inside the application, the APK file. And here you can see it added about 37 megabytes. So when you install the game from the App Store, Android system by default doesn't all the optimization it possibly can for saving space and resources. So you could do that. That might improve performance slightly. Well, not really performance, but microstarters and other stuff. You could disable dummy mode in settings, and additionally you could set Shizuku spacing to lower or higher. If you experience some issues where commands don't apply, you could set it to higher, and if you see that the app takes some time to respond, that you could set it to lower. This view by default shows the apps that have game categories specified. So sometimes happens that you have a game installed, but it does not declare a game category in its manifest, so it will be filtered to the other tab. But on my device and on some other devices, the system does not allow you to set downscale for any app if it doesn't have a game categories. So on some devices you could set it, and on other devices you couldn't. On mine you can. So if you expand any application, you would see that the app reports that package is not of game type, and to use game mode commands, it must specify game category. So by default you couldn't do that. It could be set when installing from the Play Store by the Play Store, but it doesn't do it. Most of the times it can be specified in the manifest by the app developer, but there is a handy tool to force a game category. It might not work on all the apps. Well, it works on most of the apps perfectly fine if you're running with root, but if you're running with Shizuku, the system limits what you can do. But for example, if I switch to root access, I could just click force game category, I could run test, it does some checks, and then I can apply it. And now I could just set this random application to run at a lower resolution. So you could see I set it to 0.1 and it looks like ass, which is precisely what we want. And you could undo category change. With Shizuku it will do slightly different process, and on some games it might not work, on some it will. There are different complications, but either way, this is not a core functionality. So now going to the Toolbox tab, there are some useful tools. For example, FPS meter overlay, global downscale, change refresh rate, and clear app cache. For example, let's start with clearing app cache. You click clear, you wait a few seconds, and it shows you how much cache it cleared. It is completely safe, it does not delete any data, so what it deletes is equivalent of you opening app settings on your phone and clicking clear cache. For example, maybe you have like Instagram or other app that was downloaded media, and that media is not needed, like it is cached, but you could save up some space. Next thing is refresh rate. It only works with root because system again limits very strongly what apps and permissions are needed to change the refresh rate. But if you're running root, you could change the refresh rate of your screen. Next is global downscale. It will allow you to set the resolution of the whole screen. So for example, if your game does not natively support game mode interventions, or if your ROM doesn't work correctly, you could set resolution here. For example, I will click to 0.25 and you could see it is running at low resolution, and then it resets because it has reset by default. But you could, for example, change aspect ratio. So I might change my screen to 16:9 and I will click apply, and now my screen is just shorter. I could set a different resolution, different DPIs when it resets, or you could just, disable resetting, and you can, if some elements of the, for example, system UI status bar or other are not set correctly, you could click restart system UI after applying new resolution, or just reboot your phone. But one thing to note is on some devices I heard, for example on MIUI ROMs, if you set the resolution to lower than 480p, it won't work well and you might face soft reboot. So Yeah. And you obviously shouldn't be stupid and set resolution or DPI to too high or too low values. So for example, now I'm gonna show you to set DPI to 600 and my screen taps and all the elements become slightly larger. Or I could set, for example, to 240 DPI and it is gonna be like a tablet mode basically. But you're gonna be real careful with this. And it has reset resolution after 5 seconds by default. And you shouldn't disable this option until you are 100% sure that everything is working fine for you. Next thing, and arguably one of the coolest in the app, is FPS meter. So for example, you could enable it, you could enable FPS graph, or change other settings. You can select which things you want to be displayed: FPS, scale, CPU usage, RAM usage, power usage, and others. You could select where you want it. Well, on some devices it might not return some types of data. So for example, on Chinese ROMs, theoretically it could not return power or RAM usage, I don't know, but like you should notify me in support group. So when you start it and when you open the game, it is showing you a really cool overlay. So here you see FPS, current scale, CPU usage, RAM usage. CPU usage, by the way, can go over 100% because in these measurements 100% is one core of your CPU, and for example my CPU has 8 cores, octa-core, so full throttle would be theoretically 800%, but if the game is running multi-core, then you will see over 100%. That's one thing to note. It also shows you your power usage of your device, and it shows you a cool graph of your FPS here. You could set a different settings, like for example, you can disable FPS graph, you can enable fraps style, and it's gonna be just a big bold letters. Well, I haven't added custom font yet, but chances pretty high that when you're gonna install this, it's gonna be already with a custom font. So in this example, you could see that drop in resolution by, well, not very much significantly visual quality wise. Well, I mean, it is a bit lower. Well, you're running game at 360p, but personally I would say that it is completely acceptable. I could play it. Well, I mean, playing 1080p at 20 frames is complete ass, but playing 360p at 120 FPS is, well, absolutely fine. And the lower you go, the higher your frame rate will be. And for example, in this case, it gave me like 4 times FPS boost, but I'm not gonna show because it's gonna load too long, but I could just paste the clips, overlay them. For example, for Minecraft, I had it running with new visuals, and it was running at like 8 FPS, and then I dropped the resolution and it gained and was running at 70 frames per second, so like about 10x the performance, but you know, it depends really. Additionally, you could do some crazy shit. So for example, I could just open the resolution. You're not actually limited to what you can enter. So for example, I'm gonna enter 001 and it is gonna run at just 11 pixels by 24, and you're gonna see it here. This shit is so fucking funny, and like, yes, this is a game. It is running at 11 pixels. You could theoretically play it, and you know, I find it really hilarious and actually impressive that you're not limited and you could just do whatever you want. You could run your game at 4K or do other stuff. Well, I guess that's pretty much about it. See ya.